Hello everyone, welcome to Psychology 303, Analysis of Everyday Behavior, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about stimulus control. So in talking about reinforcement, extinction, punishment, a lot of the focus has been on consequences. So if we think about that three-term contingency, antecedent, behavior, consequences, all of those have been focusing on what happens after the behavior occurs. But there are other ways of effectively controlling or modifying behavior, and we can also focus on the first part of that contingency, the antecedent part. This can consist of different stimuli, different environments, different situations or circumstances that happen directly before the behavior occurs or while the behavior is occurring. And this kind of suggests that behaviors can often be specific to the situation that you're in. So you may only behave in certain ways in certain situations. So you might only write on a piece of paper in a classroom setting, whereas everywhere else you might use your phone or a tablet, something like that. So it could not only could be the case where you have to be in a certain situation for the behavior to occur, but it could also be the case where it just happens more frequently in that situation, or that specific environment increases the likelihood of that behavior occurring tenfold. So what are some other examples? You can think of a lot of very simple applications of stimulus control. So behavior of, say, picking an apple. You're only going to pick an apple if you're in a field. You're only going to pick an apple, or you're going to be much more likely to perform that behavior if the apple is ripe, rather than if the apple is not quite ripe. Example of asking a child asking parents for money. Most likely, if they're paying attention, the child's going to know, am I more or less likely to be able to actually get money from mom versus dad? So maybe mom's really strict with money, maybe dad's wanting to be all buddy-buddy, so he's a little bit more freewheeling and dealing. So the parent that is there in the room is going to have an influence on whether or not the behavior occurs. So the child's probably a lot less likely to ask for money if mom's there compared to if dad's there. So that would be an example of a behavior, asking for money, that's under stimulus control. That means a certain stimulus, when it's present, increases the likelihood of that behavior occurring tenfold. Other examples, you don't stop at a stoplight unless the light is red. You don't answer a phone unless it rings. Different situations or circumstances, again, is going to increase the likelihood of behaviors occurring. So you're much more likely to tell kind of a dirty joke to a friend versus a boss. And we can apply this to even kind of sexual behaviors. Think about having sex. You only do that in certain situations. You don't just have sex or perform sexual behaviors anywhere under any circumstances. So again, another example of a behavior that's under stimulus control. So if we really want to define what stimulus control is, we're talking about a stimulus that increases the likelihood of behavior occurring. So again, it's not necessarily that a stimulus causes the behavior to occur, but the presence of the stimulus simply increases the likelihood that a behavior is going to occur. So it could be a specific stimulus, say one specific environment or situation. So maybe I brush my teeth only in my bathroom, my specific bathroom. Or it could be a stimulus class. So I might maybe brush my teeth in any room that has a sink. That has a much wider range of stimuli that could increase the likelihood of that behavior occurring. And when you think about it, most behaviors that we perform on a day-to-day basis are under some kind of stimulus control. We don't perform every single behavior in every single situation. Even breathing. We think, oh yeah, we perform breathing everywhere. Well, if you're underwater, hopefully you're not breathing. So again, pretty much every behavior we have, every intentional behavior, is under stimulus control. So we can use this idea of stimulus control to train behaviors to occur at specific times. And this is what's known as stimulus discrimination training. Again, it's not the case that a behavior is being caused by the presence of a stimulus. It's only just increasing the likelihood that it is going to happen. So the stimulus that is increasing the likelihood of the behavior is what's known as a discriminative stimulus. It's kind of a difficult word to say a lot. But what that means is that the behavior is only reinforced when it occurs in the presence of that stimulus. So I only get that positive reinforcer when I brush my teeth when I'm around a sink. If I brush my teeth in a room that doesn't have a sink, then I might kind of end up not getting reinforced. I don't have a place where I can spit out, rinse, and etc. And I'm probably not going to perform that behavior in settings other than a room with a sink in the future. Those other rooms that don't have a sink, those are an example of stimuli called S delta. That's when the behavior is not reinforced. So stimuli that reinforce the behavior are known as discriminative stimuli. Every other situation, it would be S delta. So an example of both of these would be, let's say the behavior would be entering a store or entering a shop. Ideally, you only want people to enter that store when the store is open. So a discriminative stimulus would be having the open sign outside the door, and S delta would be every time when that open sign is not out. So it could be a sign that says, sorry, we're closed. Trying to enter the store is not going to be reinforced if you try and enter when the shop is closed. That would be S delta. So this type of research, this type of stimulus control has been examined a lot in a wide variety of research in animals, in humans, reducing behaviors, increasing behaviors, etc., etc. And it's important, kind of the examples I've been using have been focusing on reinforcement, but it also applies to punishment. We can specifically set up situations where behaviors are only punished when certain stimuli are present, when a specific discriminative stimulus is present. So let's say we have behavior of eating soup. Well, that's a good behavior. We might be interested in reinforcing that, but maybe interested in punishing it in certain situations, such as when that soup is really, really hot and it's actually going to burn your tongue. That's when it's punished, so we only want that behavior to be punished in that situation. Yelling, there are a lot of places where yelling is acceptable, but there are a lot of other places where it's not, such as the library. When that certain environment is present, such as being in a library, that should, using stimulus control, severely reduce the likelihood of yelling behavior occurring because it's going to be punished. And it's important to really keep in mind this three-term contingency. Again, we've been focusing a lot on consequences, on reinforcement, on punishment, but the antecedent part is where the stimulus control comes into play. What is the precursor to that behavior occurring? It's that specific stimulus, that discriminative stimulus, that is going to be present. So when that's present and the behavior occurs, then we can either see a reinforcing stimulus or punishing consequences occur as a result. And that should reinforce the presence of the stimulus to either increase the behavior in terms of reinforcing stimulus or decrease the behavior in terms of the punishing consequence. So stimulus control is all well and good, but we need to be careful that, especially to make this kind of training adaptive, we need to be careful that we're not associating the behavior with this one very specific stimulus, this one very specific discriminative stimulus. So if you think about, if we train someone that when you see a stop sign, you need to stop your car, look both ways, and then proceed afterwards. They may think, okay, only this one stop sign does that behavior apply. I should only perform that behavior when I encounter that one specific stop sign. Well, that's not really helpful. We want people to perform this behavior when they encounter any stop sign. So we need to try and generalize this a little bit. Think about maybe driving in a different country. The sign is, the shape of the sign rather, is universal. That, how many sides is that? Octagon, that red octagon with the white outer line, red sign, whether or not it actually says stop on it, we recognize that as a sign to stop. And we want to kind of generalize the behavior that should occur when you see that sign to other instances, maybe different languages on the sign. So we do want generalization to occur somewhat, even though we're trying to attach the behavior to a very specific type of stimulus. So ideally what we want to see is the behaviors occur to stimuli that are similar enough. And with what we consider a generalization gradient, we see that the behavior is more likely to occur when people encounter stimuli that are most similar to the stimulus that they've been kind of being trained with in the first place. So again, the more similar a stimulus you encounter in the environment is to what you're familiar with, the more likely that behavior is actually going to occur. Again, this is with reinforcement. With punishment, it would be the less likely that it would occur. The example with the stop signs, we can think of that as kind of a stimulus class. So for example, it's not one specific stimulus, it's a kind of a range of stimuli. So we could maybe think of yield signs as also lumping into them, or any caution signs or slow signs lumped into, all right, I need to kind of slow down and perform this behavior where I'm looking around me a little bit. Ideally, what we want in a behavior is for it to kind of, seems like a contradiction, but we want it to be specific, we want it to be discriminative, but we also want it to be generalized. And we can actually see this occur in some behaviors. So for example, a child who cries to get attention or throws a fit to get attention may only do so when the child is around mom or dad, because they know that that behavior is going to be reinforced. But they might meet a new person, try that behavior out, and realize that, oh, okay, that works as well. So they may actually end up generalizing that behavior to other people that may behave similar to mom or may look similar to mom. They may try out that behavior, and if it's reinforced, then they're going to continue with it. Obviously, this is an example of generalization gone wrong. This is a negative behavior we want to eliminate, but with positive behaviors that can occur as well. So an example of this kind of positive use of generalization would be if someone has a negative behavior of abusing alcohol, drinking a lot of alcohol. They learn that drinking alcohol should only occur in specific contexts in certain ways, so it's kind of gone under stimulus control. Then we would want to generalize that stimulus control to other situations. Another great example of this would be language. We learn language in a very specific way. We learn how to write language in a very specific way. We learn to associate, okay, when we see a dog and we say the word dog, that behavior is going to be reinforced. So using words are example of behavior that's under stimulus control. So if you see a cat and a child says dog, that behavior is not going to be reinforced because it's not a dog, it's a cat. But with words, we want to try and generalize this. So if a child learns what the word dog is and how it's spelled and what letters it uses, they're going to learn it in a specific font, in a specific size, in a specific color. But we want the child to recognize that same word in many different fonts, different contexts, different sizes, and be able to understand what that means. Just like if a child sees the word man on a restroom sign, if they learn that, okay, that means it's the men's room, and if it's a little girl, we don't want them to go in there, then we also want them to be able to generalize that to every other time they see that sign on a door. Even if it looks a little bit different, we want that little girl to realize that's the men's room, even though it's not the exact same sign, so you shouldn't perform the behavior of actually entering it. So that's all I have for stimulus control. Pretty simple concept, but a very powerful effect on influencing behaviors. Thank you all again for your time and attention, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks.